This is Mark, I'm back and welcome back to the tutorials. This is the fourth part of our Fatfree training sessions, and so far we've been doing some structuring. We have created a project that looks pretty good and it looks structured. We have controllers, we have views, we are using also a template, but we are missing some very important part, and that is the model. That is the database connection. So today what we're going to do, we are going to create a database connection. We are going to set up a little test database. We're going to connect that to our project, and we will set and then insert and query some data from that database. And after that, my plan is that you should be completely able to use this as a bootstrap or kickoff project, a sample project for Fatfree. And I will clean this up, or actually I have already cleaned this up to look much better, and I'm uploading it to GitHub so that anybody can just download it and fork it. So let's get started. Oh, and by the way, before we go on, I want to thank you for the nice comments and feedback on the past sessions, and you give me a lot of nice positive feedback, and I'm more happy to do this than I was before. So let's do this work. If you look at my screen now, this is what you see. This is the result of the last session here. This was the last lecture, the end result. And now let's add the database to our project. So first of all, what we need to do in our local development environment, we need to create a database. And you can use many different tools to do this. And I assume that if you are looking at this Fatfree tutorial, you probably know how to create a database on your own system. But if you don't know how to create a database, I will very shortly explain where to go. So we are going to use MySQL because MySQL is popular, and I use MySQL. I don't want to start a debate which database is better or worse. You can use whatever you like. I use MySQL on this project. I used to use SQLite, but that is really light, so I use it for some small testing, sandboxing stuff. And I started using MongoDB recently, and I fell in love with it. So it's really up to you. I don't want to convince you to do this or that. We're going to use this for this tutorial. And how you can do that? You can install MySQL from an installer. So if you go to this website here, devmysql.com, and here you will find a Windows version, you will find a Linux or Mac version as well. If you are on Linux, I think many distributions come with MySQL installed, so you can you need to run the service, to start the service from the command line. And if you are a Linux guy, you probably know how to do that. If you are on Windows or you are on a Mac, and maybe if you are a newbie, you could go to these sites. XAMPP here, where is it? Okay, so this one here, this is one complex package, and it will give you a web server, a MySQL server, and some tools as well. So you install that on your system, you start it up, and you get everything included. Same with MAMP. MAMP goes for, I think they are available for Windows and Mac, and I'm not sure about Linux here. But anyway, the thing is, I have a German version. Whatever. So if you use this, you get the same thing. You see here, these are the icons. I have MySQL installed on my Mac, plus I have MAMP installed on my Mac as well. I use them in parallel. I use this one, the MAMP one, I use mostly for WordPress, because I install everything in one environment, and the one-click install just works really nicely in this one. And for other projects, I use the stuff that I installed and is available from the command line. Okay, so as we create a database, so please install one of these and start up the servers. So if you come here, I stop my servers here, and if you install MAMP, you just click here, you start your servers, and your servers will be running. And I'm not going to use MAMP for the tutorial, by the way, because I will tell you in a minute why. Oh, I need to enter my password. This is fantastic. Okay, now, okay, so if I start up my servers, Apache couldn't be started because port is used by some other software. Okay, we are not going to use MAMP anyway, so I'm not going to spend time on this now. But the thing is that you should please start your server. And after you started up your MySQL server on your machine, then we need to have some database administration tool, a UI, to manage the databases that we have. And that's the important part. If you use MAMP or XAMPP, you will have PHP MyAdmin included, but I'm not using PHP MyAdmin. I'm using something else because it more looks like the enterprise tools that I used to use before in my enterprise career, and that is called MySQL Workbench. MySQL Workbench, this is the stuff that I'm talking about. It's part of MySQL. You can actually download and install it from the MySQL website, similarly to the MySQL database. And I use this tool to connect to the server. I can see the status of the server. So if I just click this one, this is the server and it's running, so I don't need to do anything else. I can even start up and shut down my servers from here, so I can stop it, I can start it, whatever I like. There's a home page, so I can set up different connections as well. So this is where we want to start today. And if you don't like this tool, don't install it. If you like this tool, please install it. It's really lovely, very useful. If you are on Linux, then I want to be helpful here because I just discovered this recently, that this is a Linux box on my Mac, and I discovered this recently that if I do a where is it? So you can install okay guys, you can install MySQL Workbench here with apt-get install MySQL, and I think there's a dash here, workbench, and you see, that's the way, and then everything is up and running. So Linux is just fantastic. But so let's close this because let's come back to Mac and let's do real work. So please get to the stage where you have a database server running on your computer and you have either PHP MyAdmin or MySQL Workbench running. And this is what we're gonna do. If you are on PHP MyAdmin, then you're probably already connected to your local server. If you are on this tool that I'm using, then you should add a new connection. And that new connection you need to add to your local host, which is this one. This is the default port. If you change the default port, what you're doing anyway. Root is the username and password is empty. That's the default setup. So I close this and open it again. So this is my local host and these are my local databases. I'm up and running. Okay, so the first thing we gotta do, we gotta create a database. In MySQL, like in many other SQL databases, what you gotta do, you gotta create a new schema. So there is this little plus here, create a new schema. We push this one and we say this is gonna be F3 MVC. That's the name of our schema. That's gonna be the name of the database. Okay, I'm gonna use this name. I click apply. I click apply again, and there we go. We have a database set up. That is cool, right? Okay, and okay, I want to set this to UTF-8 anyways, but I don't know why it was set to something else. Anyway, okay, so I have this one. Then I want to create a new user because I could use the other users that are already there. I could be even root if I like, but I want to be secure, so I will create a username with the same name as the schema, and let's add admin in the end. So this is going to be the admin user of the schema. Password, let's have the same passwords. Okay, administrative load. Okay, let's have a DB manager schema. Let's add the schema, select, and this is the new schema. Okay. And revoke, there is no such grand defined. Wow. Okay. Error saving account. What's wrong? What's wrong? Account limits administrative. Okay, so I want to create a DB manager. I want to apply error saving account. Okay. I'm going to close this. I'm going to close this too. So this is my new schema. I'm going to add a new user because I just want to add a new user. No, that user is already here. Revert. Okay, this is the user that we just created. Okay. And I wanna actually add this guy to this schema, select all and apply. Okay. Fantastic. Now it was working. Yeah, sometimes this tool plays tricks on me, but it only happens if, once every couple of months. All right, so now we have a database. This is the database name and it's running on our local host. Okay, so what's next? What we have to do here? We need to set up our project to connect to this database. So let's go over to our source code. And last time we had a folder name that was called 1 space base. That was the base folder. Now I have changed the name of the project so that it looks more, explanatory, more descriptive. And I start up this project in Sublime Text. I think it's already here. Okay, so this is the project in Sublime Text. And the first thing we want to do here is that we want to do to our config ini. And in the config ini, we want to set up the database connection parameters. And we're going to do this by, actually, I'm going to do this by copy and pasting this from my sandbox because I have done some preparatory work before. And I just want to make sure that everything is fine. Okay, so of course the name of this user has changed, but I will add this later. So these are the names of the global variables. You probably remember the global variables that we discussed in the last lectures. And here, these are the names that I made up. So I came up with these names for these variables. And this is the syntax of a MySQL connection. So MySQL, and then you need to give the host name, and this is the local host. You need to give the port, and you need to give the database name. So I'm not working in my sandbox anymore. I'm working in my new database, and that's the name of the database. That's lovely. And this is the name of the admin user, and this is the password of the admin user. 3 MVC admin, FT MVC admin. So let's double check everything again. And these global variables will help us to connect to the database. And if you have multiple databases, that's why I'm calling this dev, not only just DB. Because if you have multiple databases, one for development, one for production, or one for this purpose and one for another, you can set up everything here and then use them appropriately in your source code. So without too much explanation anymore, let's go over to the next step. And the next step is that we open up our controller. So please remember that the controller that we have here is the parent class of all the controllers in our application. So the other controllers, like main controller, we have only one. It extends the controller, so it's an object-oriented object hierarchy. So this is a class hierarchy, and this class is the parent. So whatever I do here will be available in the main controller and all the other controllers that in the end will extend this controller. So what I want to do, the database will be mainly used in the controller. So that's where we get the data. That's where we, that's where we pass the data to the database. That's the controller's task to keep the connection with the database. So the good idea is that in this parent class, we're going to connect to the database and use that connection throughout the application. So in order to do that, first of all, we need to add here two class variables. And unlike in the previous tutorials, I will now be copy and pasting because I'm prepared. Okay, so these are two variables. The first one is F3, and you remember that so far we only got an instance of F3 in our index.php. So you see here we have an instance of base. In the first lecture we discussed that. Now what we're gonna do, we are going to have another instance that we will get this instance in the constructor of controller, and we're gonna store it in this variable. And the database, once the connection is established, we're gonna store the database also in this variable here. And in every controller, the way we can access these, you will see later on, but the way we're gonna access these is that if you just say this F3, and then that's gonna be exactly this thing here. So let me remove this for now, and let's come to the constructor, because that's where the new stuff happens. All right, so we add a new constructor. Construct, this is the PHP standard name of the constructor, and this is the same line that we use in our index.php. So this is a new instance of F3, and we set this variable to be equal to this instance. This is fine. And then this is where we set up the connection. So the connection goes this way. We're going to create a new DB Sequel, and this DB Sequel is a class in Fatfree. So this is an F3 component. We're going to create a new instance of this one. And the parameters that we provide here is the global variables. So you remember that on F3 if we do get, that will get a global variable that's name is this string here. So these are the variables that we set up in our config ini, these guys here, and we give these parameters to this function call, and we can even create a connection without this last line. But this last line is very handy, and actually I have spent some time to dig this out when I started out with F3, and it is very useful because it will raise the exceptions from the database into your exception handling mechanism. So whenever there is some issue, you will get the database error and you can see what's gone wrong in the database. So I think it's a good idea to add this. It helps a lot when you're debugging some stuff. Okay, and the next one, so we get the DB, this is going to be the database, and we set the DB variable to this one. And we remove one line, so it looks so neat. And then now we have set up the connection. All right. So if I come back to this local page here and do a refresh, then everything should be fine. And everything is fine, which means that we have a database connection. Because when we do the routing here, when we ask for this route, then this controller will be, there will be an instance created of this controller, and this construct method is run. I think we have a database connection, but we can test it. Actually, I don't believe that we made it for the first time. So let's change the password. Change this. Ah, you see. Now this is proof. This is proof. Big time. All right. So, okay, I was a little scared because the user was not created the right way here, so I thought that something was going wrong, but it seems to be right. So everything is working fine, and the database connection is there. And this thing here, the output of our application is still the same. That was last week, but we're going to change it in a minute. All right, so now what we need, let's create some test data then. So let's go back to the MySQL Workbench application. Let's open up our new database, and under tables, if you right click, I love this tool. I mean, it really looks like an enterprise tool. So what I was thinking that for this lecture we create a messages table, and we're gonna create messages that we display on screen. That's a simple scenario, but I think it's very good to show the concept. So the first one, let's create an ID. The ID, it is going to be the primary key, which is PK here, not null, it cannot be null, and AI is auto increment. So that means that MySQL will increment this ID automatically, and you don't even need to provide this. Okay, and the second one, I decided to put key value pairs here. So this is going to be a key, and it's a varchar 45, which is okay. Let's have it not null. I don't know why I'm putting constraints, but let's put constraints. And the message itself is, let's change it to a little longer, and it's also mandatory, and apply. Bang. Now you apply this. So beautiful. Let's refresh, and if we refresh everything here now, I think I created the database, or that's the issue here, that I need to set this database to be active, because right now this is not the default database. So set as default schema. Okay, then tables, create table. I'm sorry, let's do it again. Messages. If you have multiple databases, make sure you are working on the right one. I'm sorry about these guys. Let me quickly fix this. 255. Okay. No. Apply. Bang, and yeah. All right. So now if we refresh this, then we have the new database. Okay. So we can close this one, and here, if we click the rightmost icon, that opens up a new query window. And in this query window, we are working within the new messages table. And let's create the first record. You can immediately edit it here. So it's gonna be the hello world message again. So this is gonna be key hello world. This is the key that we use. And the message is gonna be hello world from DB, so that we know that this is coming from the DB. And I click apply, and I have a record in the database. So if I run this with this little thunder here, okay, so I run the query again, and you see there is one record in the database. So let's move on. So the next thing we're gonna do is that we go back to our project structure. Okay, this is my PHP server, and this is my project structure here in Midnight Commander. So in app, under app, we have controllers and views, and here we create a new folder called models. So simple. And under that, let's create a messages.php. This is gonna be the class of our messages. So if I go back to Sublime Text and open up my model, this is our model. And now let me just copy the first part of this one and explain what's inside. Okay, so this is the messages class, and that extends DB SQL mapper. Now, this is a very good concept in Fatfree. This is basically the ORM, the object relational mapper of the Fatfree framework. So if you want to read more about this one, then go to Fatfree, the Fatfree website, and then under the user guide, go to number 5, databases, and read everything on this page. That would be my suggestion. But if you look for the mapper, then you will see more details on this mapping class. But it's not so complicated, so let's see what we have here. First of all, we are setting the constructor of this class, of the messages class. And it receives one argument, that is the DB. So when we use this, you will see, as we use this, we're going to pass the DB that we created here in our controller. So this DB will be passed to the constructor. And the next thing that is done is that this is going to map the content of this table here into a PHP object. So every table in your database will be represented as a PHP object. Yeah, of course, if you create the related model and mapping class like this one for every table, then your tables will be mapped to PHP objects. So the name of the table is messages. So I update this to messages because in the sandbox I use something else. Just please ignore this sandbox stuff. It's just something that I use to prepare for this tutorial. And the first function that we create here is a function that will query and retrieve all records from this database table. And there is one method to do this and load. So this here, this is this class, messages. And this is a mapper, and the mapper has a function called load. So if you go here and look for load, then you will find that there's a description for the load methods within the Fatfree framework. So what we are doing is very simply we say that from this table we load stuff, everything, and then we return the results of this query. And that's important because then the results of the content of the table will be available as an object returned by this function. So I think it's better if I show you how to invoke this function. But before we do that, we got to do something important. And that is that we have created a new folder and we have created a new class. And that class needs to be included somehow when our project is running. So we have to go back to our config file. And you remember the last time I told you that if you use new folders in a new structure, then you can use the pipe symbol, this one, to add new folders. So what we do, we go app and then we go models here. And remember to put a / at the end of the folder as well. So also you see here there is a / at the end of the folder name. Okay, so now the auto load of Fatfree will automatically include the classes that are under this folder plus this folder. And I'm sorry if I'm going too details. I know that we have touched this before, but it's important. So now the new model will be available. So what we gotta do, let's see if it's still working. It is still working. That's just fantastic. Okay, and then we go to our main controller and we're gonna use this. Okay, so in the main controller, I think what first I want to do, I get rid of this crap because that's not funny anymore. We use this for some purpose, but we don't use it anymore. All right, so let me come here and copy this part from my beautiful controller. Okay, so what is this? In the main controller, this is a controller that that is in charge of our page, the only one page that we have, and we create a new messages object. So this is the new model class that we created here, and we create a new object of this one, and this is the DB variable from the controller. I think you remember this. So we call this messages. It's a new object, and then we go like messages all, which is this function here, and this is going to return an array. So that array is basically, one element in an array is one record. So I will only look for the first record that has the index 0, and I pass this to the variable name called message msg. And what I need to do is that I need to pass this to our template msg, and let's call this msg. Okay, so now our template is broken because we have changed the variable and we changed the content of the data that is in the variable. So that then what we need to do, we will go to our views, and in the template, instead of name, we say msg, and then this is the important part. Then we use the dot notation to access an attribute or property of this message object, which means that we just put a dot here, and then we put the field name, because F3, the mapper, is mapping the fields into an object with exactly the same name as we have in the database. So that means if you want to put the message, then we should say msg.message. And then we save, and then we come here, refresh, and you see hello world from DB. Okay, there's an extra hello because let's do this one as well. So let's celebrate. It's time to have some fun because this thing is working. So what we just did here, we used a model class that is a mapper to display a message from our database. So we connected our project to the MySQL database, and it's working. It's so nice. So I think what I want to do, I just want to remove this extra stuff because we have seen this before already. So I don't think that this is adding extra value to you now. And okay, so this hello world message is coming from the database. So let's do the next thing here. And the next step would be that I want to show you how the entire CRUD works. So CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. And I want to show you how that works in Fatfree. So we go to our messages class, and let's add some more functions to messages. And here, this is pretty standard. I use this in all my projects. So what this does, there's a getById function that will get a record by an ID. So if you know the ID and you want to update, delete, or just display that record, then you pass the ID, and then you load. Is the same load function that we have here. The only thing is that load takes various attributes in arrays. So then you can filter what, these are basically var conditions. So this is var ID is the ID. But in a new array, you could add order by or group by or these sort of things. And you can read more about this in the Fatfree documentation that I have shown you. And this will return the query results again. Add. Now this is interesting, the next one. Because what this does, it copies from post. So this function is adding a new record. This is going to add a new record. And I think it's more useful if you post the data from a form. So let's say you have a form that will create objects that are stored in a certain database table, and you put the fields on this form, you fill in the data, And when you pass that to Fatfree in a post message, a post request, in an HTTP request, then you get all the data that are in the post, and Fatfree will automatically map those fields from post, or those elements of post that have the same key that are also present in the database. So everything that is in the DB, like in our case, for example, if I pass a key here and a message in my post, then Fatfree will automatically copy that to this messages object and save it to the database. And yeah, this is most useful when, excuse me. So this is most useful, you know, when you're managing your objects straight on a HTML page. But I usually don't do this because I usually do complex stuff. So I'm not, you know, I'm not using that with users who enter, like, I don't know, customer name and so on and stuff like this. I do more complex stuff, and I'm not managing objects like this. But I think it's good to know if you want to create just a simple CRUD application. Okay, edit is the same thing. We just first get the data by an ID. So we're editing one specific record here. And we get the data by ID. And then we copy the data from post. And then we call the update function in the mapper. Delete, again, we are deleting the specific record. We select that record based on the ID, and when this is done, we call erase, and then it's gonna be erased. Okay, so this is one way to use this, and yeah, I'm sure you can come up with use cases when you want to use this. But what I want to show you, I think this is one method, and it's most useful if you want to manage objects as they are. So like, I don't know, for example, you create a book register. Then there is an author, there is a title of a book, there is an ID number of that book, and you enter all this data. You put, you know, you push the button to save it, and then you copy the data from the post to the database, and there you go. But if you're doing something else, I think another approach is to use the object functions in the controller. And I found that I'm using the second method more often, even though I'm using these functions as well. By the way, copy from works with any array. So it doesn't only work with post, it works with other arrays where or hash maps, because where the keys are the field names in the database table. So if you create a hash map in PHP, where the keys are the database field names, and the values are whatever value you want, and you pass that array to copy from, then Fatfree will automatically map that to the database table. Okay, so let's go back to our main controller and see how we can add another record into our database. So it's going to be absolutely super simple. Okay, let me take the sample data. Okay, so I took my sample data here, and let's see what this will do. So what it does, it creates a new messages object. And this is the same model here, so the same class is a new instance of this class. And when there's a new instance, then we can immediately set the variables that are related, that are mapped to the fields in the database. So I can assign a value to the key variable. This is the key. This is the message, and save it. And that means that it's going to save that new record into the database immediately. So what I'm going next, I will use the same method that we used before. So I create a new messages class, and I will use the all method. And this time, since I have only one record in the database, I had before, now I have two, so I'm going for the second one, which is number 1. And I'm going to display that new message that we create here. So let's see how it works. Okay, so this is the second message inserted from code, which is exactly the same thing that we have here. And if I come to my database and run a query, then you will see that in the database we have a second line. So this is basically how this works. So, okay, by the way, since F3 is already in our parent controller, I can remove this one here. And I can run it again and go to set on an object. Of course, because now we need to change this like that. Okay, and I have only one instance of that. And I tell you why this is important. Call this F3. Main controller 15. No, okay, no, it's fine. Okay, I saved it and it's working. So I tell you why this is important. Because if I add F3 to this method, then Fatfree will automatically pass F3. Oh my god, what am I doing? So if I add F3 as we used to have here before, then that means that the F3 instance will be available in this function. And but that is done because this render function is in the routing configuration. So if I go to my routes ini, then you see that this is here, and this is automatically passed. But if I'm using in any other using F3 in any other controller function, because you can structure your code, you can create whatever you like here, other functions, a lot of code, and I prefer to do this in a way that F3 is a variable of this class. So I just bring F3 to the class level, and that's why I'm removing this from here and I'm setting this like that. It's a bit annoying to type $this and the arrow every time, but you can get used to it. Okay, I remove this full stop as well. I see there's a little delay. Okay, now because it's from the database. Okay, fine. So, by the way, now I have refreshed a couple of times, meaning that I should be having a lot more data. And this is the case. Okay, so I think we are ready with this one. We just connected the database, and we have the CRUD samples available. You know now how to create a new record. You know now how to find that new record. And but okay, let's find this. Let's do one last example. So let's do get by ID. So instead of all, let's do get by ID, and then let's get an ID like ID 8. Get by ID 8, and that doesn't have a dot in the end, so that should be different. Wow. Should I do it like this? No, I shouldn't. No, okay. I'm sorry. I'm just too excited. And so this is gonna be one record, and if it's one record, then we of course need to look for the 0 here. And okay, so get by ID works like this. So you can use all the functions that I gave you here. They are useful, they are usable, you can use them. And now I think we have everything ready. This is a sample project that you can build on. And this is like any other MVC framework. We have ORM. It's a little bit different from other ORMs like Ruby, for example, or Django, that would give you migrations that when you would manage your database structure from the source code. Here you need to manage your database structure yourself from tools like MySQL Workbench or something else. So anyways, I think the MVC project is ready, so I will upload it to GitHub and you can download it. And later on in the next tutorials, I want to keep moving and add data from the database where we display multiple rows in a table, and I want to add CSS, I want to add JavaScript, and I want to add bootstrap styles and all sorts of things to make it much better and make it shine. And by the way, I've spent some time in the last weeks on the previous videos, and I have created write-ups on my website. So now the links are available. If you go back to those and look at my website, then you can copy and paste code snippets from there. But if you go to GitHub, then you will get them anyway. So I hope you find this useful. And if you have any questions or comments, just feel free to comment just below.